I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons is by the same author as The Last Unicorn, Peter S. Beagle, which I have not read. So this is not going to be any kind of comparison video between The Last Unicorn and this one, his latest story, but I have heard from enough people who have read both that they greatly prefer The Last Unicorn. So for someone like me who has only read this one, I shouldn't be judging Beagle too much based off of this book, because from what I understand, it's not quite up to the same bar as The Last Unicorn, which I may or may not read eventually. So that is not to say that this was poorly done or not good. I was not sure how I felt about it at first. It felt like it was going to be a really tropey, cutesy story that didn't really matter that much. It has three main characters. Robert, whose real name is much longer and more complicated than that, but he prefers to go by Robert, is a dragon exterminator and has taken over his father's dragon extermination business. And that's how he kind of gets in with the royal family a little bit, is because they need a dragon exterminator. So they call on the one they know and trust. Then you have the Princess Cerise, who is very much the cliche fantasy princess in that she doesn't want the life of a princess. She wants so much more for herself. Princesses are normally not taught to read and write. They have other things to concern themselves with, but she has been sneaking off to teach herself how to read. And what she snuck off from was the whole, like, every prince from near and far has come to try to claim her hand, and she has to interview them, and she has to try to pick one. She doesn't want to have to do that. Instead, she would like to be able to read. So she takes it upon herself to go do that for herself. And while she is off, secretly teaching herself to read, she meets a knight in shining armor. You can see why I thought this was going to be super tropey. The knight in shining armor is more than just a knight. He is Crown Prince Reginald from one of the neighboring kingdoms. In fact, one of the strongest kingdoms, whose father, the king, would like to take over all the other kingdoms. And since Princess Cerise is supposed to be looking for a prince to marry, she sees him, who is very handsome, and thinks, aha, here's one that I actually like. Her parents are not too fond of that idea because of the powerful king, thinking that, well, he'll still take over our kingdom, he'll just do it through marriage instead of through war. But the princess's head is very turned by this handsome prince. But Prince Reginald is not like all the other princes. He is actually out on some kind of knights errant journey. So he's out trying to, like, make a man of himself, trying to put himself through tough situations that a crown prince doesn't normally have to go through. And in fact, it would be even better if he could go slay a dragon so that he could come home saying that I am Prince Reginald, Dragon Slayer. Luckily, now that Crown Prince Reginald is in whatever their town's name is that I forgot, Montagne or whatever, they just happen to know a very good dragon exterminator who can teach Reginald how to kill dragons. So with all of that going on at the beginning of the book, I wasn't sure if I was liking it. I'd heard enough people at that point say that it was a cute story that I was like, okay, cute. It's not going to go very far or go very deep, and that's fine. And then when I got to the point where I was just thinking that this is all it's going to be, we get to Robert, the dragon exterminator, having a deep emotional crisis because it finally reveals to us that even though he has this job that you can tell he doesn't really like, he doesn't like his job, he doesn't like that he had to take it over from his father, we finally find out that he really, really loves dragons. So that conflict of this young man who loves dragons, who has a job where he has to flush them out, kill them, exterminate them, is really, really hard for him, and suddenly drew me into his character. And there's other little, like, mystery things, like mysterious parts of some other characters' backstories that never really gets told to us. We're expected to just kind of pick up on it. The prose is usually not what I would prefer. It kind of has that tongue-in-cheek, comments made by the narrator sometimes. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which I probably would have preferred if it did take itself a little more seriously. There's a prologue that's there for some reason. In fact, this is probably an example of a fantasy book that did not need a prologue. So there's this thing where a lot of people apparently skip the prologues when reading a book. Not me. I always assumed that if the author put a prologue in, it was meant to be read and has to do with the story. But this prologue, once it's over, nothing that was in it really comes in again later. It felt like it was setting up for some big epic thing having to do with the dragons, and it never really went anywhere or came back in again. So this might actually be a book that I would say you can skip the prologue and it's fine. All the prologue really does is introduce the idea that dragons have come into the land, which I think is pretty obvious based on the whole premise of the book. And then sometimes a story, this one included, unfortunately, has a weird, like, 3/4 slump where it kind of feels like, where is it trying to go right now? It kind of built up to what felt like was going to be the crescendo of the book, and then it wasn't. And then the characters go and do something else, and then it felt like, okay, you know, I'm trying not to get too spoilery. It's a short book. It's not too, like, there's no big twists that would probably spoil the whole book if I said them. But there is another trope where at the end the evil character just monologues. And I felt like that went on for way too long. And not just monologuing like, here was my evil plan, ha ha ha, but also like mocking the main character. Here's my plan for the future and the horrible things I'm going to do to you. So it had that weird little slump. Felt like the villain got to monologue for way too long. And then the ending I actually thought wrapped up pretty well. It ends pretty much exactly how you would expect it to. No big surprises. It's like a happily ever after kind of book. And despite all the things I'm saying that are like the negative things with it, my criticisms, it was a cute story. It wasn't terrible. It was fine. If what you're looking for is a cute book that doesn't go too deep, it's not emotionally taxing, it's less than 300 pages, so this would probably be a really good vacation book. I still think it's worth picking up and reading. Just have expectations appropriately set, and then you won't be disappointed that it's not The Last Unicorn, which I wouldn't know personally, but that's what I hear. I also love the cover art, and that is partly why I bought it. I have followed both of the artists on here on Instagram for a while, but I didn't know that they were married. I just assumed I was following two completely separate artists. So I read in here, cover and end paper artwork by Justin and Annie Gerard. And I had seen this dragon artwork posted on Justin Gerard's illustration page on Instagram, and I've been following Annie, except her art page doesn't have Gerard in it. It says Annie Stagg or something. And I love both of their art styles, and apparently I love when they get together and do art together. It's so beautiful, so well done. I believe their website is combined and has both of their work on the same website, just their Instagrams are separate. I will link all three of those, and I highly encourage you to browse both of their artwork because it's so fantastic. They both do a lot of fantasy art. They've both done illustrations for books. They both sell their prints. And of course, I'll also link the author, a link to buy the book, and my own Instagram and Patreon. Thank you to my patrons. I always appreciate you guys so much, and happy reading.